Hi, welcome back to the Unfiltered Feed. And in this video, we are going to talk about the Japanese Grand Prix. It's literally half an hour since the Japanese Grand Prix ended. So these are my quite fresh thoughts about the race, and we have about seven things to go through. So let's get started. Um, the first thing that I want to talk about is let's go through the result at least. The top 10 were Kimi Antonelli, who won his second race. Oscar Piastri, Charles Leclerc rounding off the podium, and then you had Russell, Norris, Hamilton, Gasly, Verstappen, Lawson, and Esteban Ocon. So quite a mixed up top 10, I would say. You would probably expect the two Mercedes to be at the top and winning by quite a margin, but that wasn't the case today. Even though Kimi Antonelli won the race, he was only 15 seconds ahead, which is not a lot because considering that he was in the lead by lap 30. So he had about 25, 26 laps. 15 seconds is not that big of a gap. Although it's quite big, it's not as much as I expected. But let's talk about the first main thing of this race, which was George Russell and his disastrous Japanese Grand Prix weekend in general, because he looked quite good in the practice sessions on Friday. I think he was the fastest in FP2, if I'm not wrong. But the moment qualifying began, they made some setup change which completely ruined the balance for Russell. And he started to, the back end basically started slipping out, and it was tough for him to control the car. So they had to make a lot of changes through qualifying. And it's never easy because in qualifying, you usually just have one or two laps to kind of put in your best time. So when you go out and if you made a change, you don't really know what the car is going to do. So you can't push 100%. So it was quite a tricky qualifying. But at the end, I think he qualified in P2. So that was not bad. But today, once again, the Mercedes had a really bad start. Both Antonelli and Russell fell down to P4 and P6, I think. And then it was always a race where they had to keep overtaking the other cars. And as I mean, it's kind of not a lot of races, but so far it seems to be that the Mercedes are not very good when it comes to overtaking. So when they're stuck behind someone else, it's very tough for them. But when they're in free air, they can obviously use all the pace that they have and put out and ahead. But for Russell, that was the issue. He was in P4, and then a very badly timed safety car basically uh, took away his advantage. He had pitted the lap before, and the very next lap there was a safety car, which meant that um, Kimi Antonelli, Lewis Hamilton, and a bunch of other guys got a cheaper pit stop, and Antonelli and Hamilton jumped Russell. Not Hamilton, I think. Russell was in P3 for the safety car restart, but then once again he was not able to warm his tires up quickly, so Hamilton was able to pass him right into turn one, and then Russell was basically stuck behind Hamilton for a lot of time. And then he had some sort of issue which let Charles Leclerc past, and then Leclerc eventually overtook Hamilton. So Russell was basically stuck behind the two Ferraris and the McLaren of Piastri for a lot of time until he then passed Hamilton. So he finished in P4. But the problem for Russell now is that Kimi Antonelli is leading the championship by 9 points, which is not a big margin, but 9 points is again it's a decent margin because now even if Russell wins the next race and Antonelli finishes in P2, Antonelli will still be leading the championship, which is a bit of a psychological boost for him. So yeah, terrible for Russell. I think this 5 week break that's kind of happened because of the cancellation of the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. It couldn't have come at a better time for George Russell because the last two weekends have been really bad for him. A lot of things have gone uh, not in his way, and a lot of them are outside of his control. It's not like he's making mistakes or crashing the cars, but it's just that things outside of his control are not going his way, which is not good, obviously. So this break um, is very important for him. I hope he can regroup, reset, and come back stronger because we need a Russell versus Antonelli championship fight. I don't think Antonelli is going to win the championship one-sided, but we definitely want to see at least two drivers fighting for the championship. So let's move to the next talking point, and it's about the title fight. As I said, Kimi Antonelli obviously won his last race in China, which was also his first ever career Grand Prix win, and then he's followed that up with another pole and win at Japan, which is sensational because in this race, after lap one, he was in P6. So there was very less chance for him to win the race. There was a fear. I mean, I was watching the race and I was kind of scared that Russell would eventually overtake everybody and win the race, and Antonelli would finish in P4, P5, and kind of take a big hit in the championship. But actually, the exact opposite happened, where Antonelli ended up winning and Russell finished only in P4. So Antonelli gained 25 points, as you can see, and Russell got only 12 points. So that's a 13-point swing, which is quite a lot because, at least for the first half of the season, I think the Mercedes is going to be the best car. So most likely, you're going to see the two Mercedes locking out the front two positions. So usually the point swing is going to be 7 points. So in such a season, a 13-point swing is quite large. Anyways, I spoke about the title fight. I think it's still too early. I think Kimi is looking good, but as they get into the season, and let's say if we are at round 12, 13, and Kimi and Russell are still very close in the fight, I think that's when the external noise and the opinions or expectations are going to ramp up massively. And that's when Kimi Antonelli will that will be his biggest test. Because, like we saw with Oscar Piastri last time, he led the championship for 13 races, which was the most in the season. But at the end, there were a few external issues regarding the driving style of the car, but also he made quite a few errors towards the end. Most notably, the weekend in Baku, where he made a lot of mistakes, which kind of derailed his campaign, and then he never really found his mojo back and ended up losing the championship. So I think that critical phase is when I would like to see how Antonelli performs, because till then I think there's not a lot of, I would say, pressure because it's still early days. But the moment you enter the latter part of the European leg, right? So the moment you start uh, maybe Spa or Hungary or Monza, and thereafter, that's when the pressure ramps up a lot. And I'm sure George is not going to play it easy because he's also waited for this opportunity for so many years. And I think this year is still one of his best chances because you never know. Next year, you could see a Ferrari or a McLaren outdevelop the Mercedes, or you might as well just have Kimi Antonelli become a much better driver again, and then it would become very tough. So for Russell, this is his best shot, and I think he's going to take it with both his hands. So let's move to the third talking point, and it's about McLaren and Ferrari. Uh, there was a bit of a, let's say, a view forming that Ferrari was clearly the second best car, but they were still way behind Mercedes. And I think that's still kind of true because I think Leclerc and Hamilton, uh, they could have finished in P3, P4 had Piastri not gotten the lead at the start, because I feel Piastri leading the first part of the race really put him ahead of Leclerc and Hamilton. Because if we saw what Norris was able to do, he wasn't really in the fight at all. He was mostly just P6 throughout the race. He did try and overtake Lewis Hamilton towards the end, but again they were very close and they were swobbling for positions. So I still feel Ferrari is a bit ahead of McLaren, but certainly McLaren is not. They are not way behind Ferrari or even Mercedes. The the weird or the strange case for McLaren is that they have a Mercedes engine, And it's kind of rumored that Mercedes' advantage is because of the engine. So if McLaren has the same engine, then at least half of the problems are solved because if Mercedes find a new upgrade, McLaren automatically get it with the engine. And we've seen in 2023, 2024, and last year as well that McLaren are able to outdevelop the works Mercedes team, which is quite rare. So if both the teams are at the top of their engine performance, I would back a McLaren to kind of outdevelop Mercedes in terms of the aerodynamics and build a better car because that's what's happened over the last few years. And even this year, it I mean the opinions from all the experts and the people on the track is that the Mercedes car in general is not something groundbreaking or unique. It's just that they have a lot of engine performance. There are a lot of not rumors, but a lot of opinions saying that Ferrari actually has the best chassis and they are down on engine power. So the moment they bring some engine upgrades, Ferrari could be back in the fight. And we are seeing that because in Suzuka, Sector 1 is purely technical. There are not a lot of straights. And that's why Ferrari has been the fastest car. I think they have been faster than Mercedes consistently during qualifying. Leclerc was also going purple in the first two sectors, and then towards the end, where you have the long straight and then 130R, and then another mini straight. That's where Leclerc and Hamilton are losing their time, which kind of shows that the engine performance is the issue for them. So um, for McLaren, the good thing is that they are at least level on engine performance. I don't think they've optimized it fully yet, but once they do it, they will have to back themselves with the aero development. So McLaren, although they have had a bad start to the season in races one and two, I think this weekend they've definitely bounced back, and I think McLaren are going to be a team that you should watch out for. I don't think it's as clear as it was in the last two races, where you had Mercedes way ahead and then Ferrari in the middle, and then the rest of the field behind. I think it's Mercedes and then McLaren and Ferrari are like pretty close. McLaren is slightly ahead in terms of the potential, right? Because of the same engine as Mercedes. But yeah, it's very close. It's going to be fun to watch. So going ahead, I would probably say I would still back a Mercedes driver to win most times, but I would think that you would see Piastri, Leclerc, Norris, and Hamilton fighting for podiums regularly, which is good because you at least see some good racing like we saw today. Right, let's move to the next talking point, which is the Leclerc Hamilton battle. And I also want to talk about the battle that they had in China. I couldn't make a video for the Chinese Grand Prix because I was busy with a few other things. But that was the best wheel to wheel racing that I've seen in a very long time. Obviously, with the kind of cars we had last time, following each other was almost impossible because the moment you were closer behind a car, you would lose so much grip because of the dirty air, and then you would have to kind of build a gap, and uh, basically you were not able to follow at all. But this year with the new regs, it's become much easier for cars to follow closely, which we saw in China. We saw Leclerc and Hamilton battle for I think 3 or 4 laps back to back, and I think at one point they were battling throughout the lap. So into turn one, I think Hamilton went around the outside, and then that became the inside for turn three, I think. And then they again were fighting into the hairpin at turn 4 or 5, and then they kept going side by side, which was epic racing. And as a Ferrari fan, the last thing I want is the two Ferrari cars crashing out. But I think Hamilton and Leclerc, who are probably some of the best wheel-to-wheel racers on the grid, it's absolutely top draw stuff because uh, this is the best racing. I would love if this was for the win, but at least they're providing us some entertainment. Even today, the moment Leclerc was behind Hamilton when Russell had that issue, I immediately started to think if they're going to fight again, and they did because although it's not really easy to go side by side around this track, it's quite narrow and it's quite flowing. But I think towards the end, for the last chicane, they were constantly fighting, and at one point it felt like they had almost made a contact. So yeah, very good racing. They race each other to the very limit, but they never exceed the limit, which is the best part. And you have seen that from Leclerc with all of his teammates, because even Carlos Sainz used to say that his battles with Leclerc were some of the best. I remember the Monza 2023 battle where they were fighting for that last podium spot. So Leclerc never really has crashed with his teammate or even any other driver for that matter. He's very respectful, yet he'll push you to the limit, which is absolutely amazing to watch. So I really hope Leclerc and Hamilton can keep fighting. The only issue with that is usually if they are fighting, it means that they're using their deployment at different times, and it's often not the most optimal strategy because uh, it allows the cars behind to then catch up and potentially overtake one of the cars. And once that happens, it kind of is a disadvantage because, like we saw today, Russell was behind the two Ferraris, but then as soon as the two Ferraris started fighting, like Russell was able to pass Hamilton, and after that, once the Ferraris are split, it kind of becomes very difficult because usually if the two Ferraris are right behind each other, the second Ferrari is getting boost of the first Ferrari, which is preventing the car behind the second Ferrari to overtake. But the moment you split the two Ferraris, the leading Ferrari is basically becomes powerless, and then the other car can pass both of them, and then it's an issue. We saw that happening in China as well, and today as well. It almost happened. Luckily, Leclerc was able to keep Russell behind, but it was very close to happening. So yeah, I think this is again an early part of the season, and Ferrari is not fighting for wins right now. So I don't think they really care. um, they would probably just let Hamilton and Leclerc fight, and kind of establish the order within the team. And the moment they get a better car to fight for wins, I think then they can use these moments to kind of establish the team order, and then they can probably restrict the drivers from fighting, which is what we saw from McLaren last year. So yeah, I don't see team orders coming in anytime soon, but that's some top draw racing. So I hope it continues. The next talking point that I have is about Max Verstappen. He's clearly not in love with these regulations. In fact, he's been saying that since 2023. If you go back, I think there was a video at the Dutch Grand Prix or a European race, I think from that season, where in a press conference he was asked about his thoughts for the 2026 regulations. And he said at that point that it's going to be very boring because it's basically just all about the engine, and you're going to see drivers slow down at the end of the straights and all of that. And back then, all of us thought that the regulations back then were just an initial idea, and they would obviously improve upon it and make sure to kind of preserve the core of F1 racing. But that does not seem to be the case because even now, if you look at 130R, which is an iconic corner where historically the cars have always been flat out and you test the grip of an F1 car, now they're slowing down before 130R to recharge the battery, which is a shame. So qualifying is not the spectacle that it used to be. The races are a bit better than last time, but again, uh, a lot of fans are divided because most of the fans who are a bit old school, they kind of think that this racing is artificial because it's battery operated racing, right? The car ahead of you loses battery, so you're going to obviously overtake them. There's no real driver skill or F1 skill or driving skill. I don't know how to put that. On the other hand, a lot of people are saying that we are seeing more overtakes, so it's obviously more eventful. Um, I am kind of in the middle. I think compared to last year, where the racing was absolutely boring and dull, where you had basically no chance to overtake, it's better that at least we're seeing a lot of overtakes. So there's some excitement to watch the race. But yeah, I also feel that the passes are a bit artificial. But at the same time, I think DRS was also artificial. So I think if they try and make the passes more authentic, then we're going to get a bit more boring racing. So it's a fine balance. Verstappen, coming back to Max Verstappen, he's kind of threatened, or not threatened, but he's always said that he is not a big fan of this regulation and it could potentially lead to him leaving the sport. I think um, I would probably not take it with a pinch of salt because Verstappen in general has been quite honest. He never really likes to say something just for the sake of it to gain some media attention. He usually is very straightforward and speaks his heart out. So if he's saying that he's not quite sure about his future in F1, then that's the case. And Formula One, instead of making him shut down or asking him to not be as critical of the regulations, they should focus on taking his feedback and trying to reach to a compromise where the drivers are happy, but the overall electrification thing is also maintained because it's not just Verstappen who's unhappy. You've seen drivers like Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, even Lando Norris. They haven't been as, I would say, supportive or as happy with these regulations. So there's certainly something that the FIA needs to do. And one thing that I really hate from them is the kind of censorship that they're doing on social media. I think after the Australian Grand Prix, they posted a graphic where they showed that the number of overtakes increased by about, I think, 80 or 70 compared to 2025. And the fans in the comments were saying that this was mostly just artificial racing and it's not true Formula One and all of that. And Formula One were basically just hiding those comments, which is a joke because I mean, if someone is being offensive or abusive, then for sure you can hide those comments. But if fans are just expressing their views, it is very unfair to hide that because then, like, why are you even, um, you say that fans are above everything else, but then you do this. It's quite hypocritical from them. The second thing that they were doing recently was not showing onboards for the parts of the track where the cars were losing speed because of super clipping. For example, at the Japanese Grand Prix, as I said, at the 120R corner, 130R, I'm sorry, the cars were losing speed because they had to recharge their batteries. So the moment the cars reached that part of the track, the onboard cameras were stopped and they started showing broadcast cameras, which is a joke because F1 knows that this is not how it should be, and they are basically trying to just hide it instead of kind of making a statement and saying that they're working on fixing it. They're just hiding it, which is not good. And the the excuse that they gave was that the onboard cameras for Kimi Antonelli, who was on pole, started malfunctioning the moment they reached that part of the track, and that's why they had to shift to broadcast. But then clearly, if you go to F1 TV and look at the onboard cameras, you can see that it's available, the footage. So F1 is just, it's so weird, and they just think that the fans are stupid and that they won't understand what's happening, but we all do. And this is actually quite sad. If F1 have made a mistake with the regulations, they should at least come out and accept it, and do something about it instead of just hiding all the flaws. That's not fair. So yeah, that's about Max Verstappen. There are also talks about him retiring as soon as this year, which I don't really see happening because this is also the second part is that the Red Bull car also is not good. So it's I think this frustration comes from these two things, right? It's not just that the regulations are bad, but also that the Red Bull car is terrible. So I think if the Red Bull improves and they start fighting for podiums and wins, I think Verstappen will maybe manage. He'll still maintain his argument against the regulations, but he'll at least be able to drive the car better and have some fun. So I think he'll wait for the Red Bull situation to be a bit more clear. If there's no chance that they can improve in the near time, then you might see Verstappen either moving to a different team or just leaving the sport. But I think that he will be in the sport for 2027, and that's when he'll take a call. So 2028 is when I feel Verstappen's involvement could be in doubt. But next year, I think he'll be there. So that's quite a long rant from me about the Verstappen situation and also the Rex. But I feel that I needed to put this out because honestly, it's quite sad to see what Formula One is doing. It's not something that I expect from them. Let's move to the next point now, which is Liam Lawson and Pierre Gasly. I think both of them have finished in the points in all the three races so far, which is epic because I think both these drivers were kind of unfairly portrayed because of their situations last year. For Liam Lawson, we all know what happened. He was promoted to Red Bull prematurely. He had a very bad start to the season, and again, prematurely he was demoted from Red Bull, which was very sad to see. And then I'm sure it must have had a big impact on his, mental state and his self confidence. And it would have taken him some time to, get back to to his optimum level. And I'm really happy that they gave him a chance again this year. And during my predictions for the championship, I had said that Liam Lawson is someone who's going to be really good, and nobody really expects much from him, but he's actually a very good driver, and he's shown that because I think the Racing Bulls car hasn't been the best in the first three races. In Australia, I think the track kind of suited them. That's what I heard Lawson say. But in China and also in Japan, he's been saying that the car isn't really the best. So they're just doing some great execution, and Lawson has been driving the car really well, not making a lot of mistakes. So he's got two more points this time, and he's on 10 points in the championship, which is only 2 points behind Max Verstappen. So that's quite interesting. And for Pierre Gasly, again, the last two seasons were terrible because of Alpine. That car was absolutely horrendous. They were P10 in the championship last time, and even in 2024, for the most part of the season, they were P10 before they got that shock double podium at Brazil. But I mean, the car was very bad throughout that year as well. So Gasly hasn't really got a car that he deserves. So he wasn't able to kind of show his actual skill and his driving prowess. But now that he's got a nice car with a Mercedes engine, which is probably the class of the field, he's starting to show why he is a quality driver. He held Max Verstappen for the entire race. I think ever since the safety car ended, both of them were within a couple of seconds of each other for the entire race, and he held Verstappen back. Verstappen overtook him at one point, but then Gasly came back immediately. So that was great racing from him, and he also has scored points in all the three races, which is really good. So I'm very happy for Gasly and Lawson, and I'm sure both of them are going to get the credit that they deserve. And I would also say that Gasly is potentially a front-running driver for me. He had that stint with Red Bull in 2019, which didn't go well, which was very similar to what Lawson experienced. So both of them are basically trying to kind of correct or undo the bad reputation that they suffered at Red Bull. So both of them are in similar situations. But yeah, I think Gasly definitely deserves a great car, and I'm really happy that he's finally got that with Alpine. Let's move to the final talking point, which is unfortunate, but we have no Formula One for the next 5 weeks, which is really sad because the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix have been cancelled. Obviously, we all know why. It's the unfortunate situation that's unfolding in the Gulf, and Bahrain is quite close to that area, and obviously there was no chance that the Bahrain Grand Prix was going to happen. And for Saudi Arabia, again, although it's not as close to the region, it's again not the safest thing for the drivers, the crew, but also the fans, because a lot of fans travel from different parts of the world to come and watch the races, and even if there's a bit of a risk, I think the better thing is to not really go ahead with the event. Yeah, for us fans who watch from our homes, it's going to be boring because 5 weeks is a long time. I think it's almost as much or even longer than the summer break that happens later in the year. So we basically are going to have two breaks, right? We've got one spring break, which you can call this, and then we'll have a summer break later. So it's going to be quite boring. And I think even after these 5 weeks, we have one race in Miami, and then there's again 2 weeks without F1. So it's basically 21 days until the next race after that, which is in Canada, followed by another 1 week break, and then we have the race in is it Monaco? I'm not sure. So in the next 10 weeks or so, we only have three F1 races, which is a shame because the summer break, sorry, the winter break felt quite long, and we were just back, and the championship scenario is quite exciting. So we'll have to kind of just wait and yeah, just keep speculating for the next 5 weeks until we see F1 back. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Um, as I said in the previous video as well, most of my, I would say, not analysis, but most of my thoughts are going to be about the top four teams because that's the part of the race that I'm most excited and looking forward to seeing. Obviously there are teams like Audi, Aston Martin, and Cadillac who are not doing that well. Audi is fairly decent, but they've had a few management related issues. Their team principal Jonathan Wheatley left for Aston Martin, and for Aston and Cadillac, they're just lacking a lot of performance. So those three teams are not in the best spot. I think Haas and Racing Bulls are doing pretty well. They're actually outperforming their cars right now, and Alpine was doing great. So yeah, fair job for them. And Williams is again one team that's not really doing well at all. They were so hyped going into this year, and they've absolutely underdelivered. So that's painful to see. Drivers like Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, Fernando Alonso, even Sergio Perez and Bottas, all of them struggling and fighting for the last few positions. It's very depressing to watch. So I hope all of those teams can turn things around and kind of start fighting for points. But as I said in my predictions, the first year of a regulation cycle is always like this, especially an engine regulation cycle. It's always going to be very, the gap is going to be very wide. But I'm pretty sure, going into the race at Miami, almost all the teams are going to bring a lot of upgrades. So we could see a potential shift or a movement in the pecking order. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to. But obviously, 5 weeks is a long time. The only good thing is that the IPL has started. um, so at least there's going to be something else to watch. But yeah, for us F1 fans, it's going to be a very long 5 week break. But I hope you guys will obviously do something great. And we'll be back for the Miami Grand Prix in May. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, do like, share, and subscribe. It feels funny to say this, but yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments as well. And I'll be back on TUF1 for the Miami Grand Prix. Until then, goodbye and stay safe.
स्टेडियम में शोर है एनर्जी ऑन द फ्लोर है दिस इज द अनफिल्टर्ड फीड